Hi everyone, Amani Kashero here again. So in this final recording, we now want to speak about eco-social work and environmental justice in the Australian context. So we chose to speak about eco-social work in particular because that's the framework that many people might end up working with. And even if you are doing something other than social work, it is still relevant to you because the approach is still the same. So eco-social work really links social justice and environmental action. And in Australia, this includes how social workers get to engage in aiding communities who are facing climate disasters, but also how they get to advocate for clean resources and empowering Indigenous communities, conservation, but also it focuses on both built environment, that's the physical environment such as cities, housing, and infrastructures, and the social environment, which is a core aspect of social work. Social relationships are very important when it comes to protecting the environment. Working with communities, building relationships, system thinking, all these are core aspects which go into the other aspect of eco-social work. So two core aspects make the concept of eco-social work. Built environment, the physical environment, and we get to focus on that as social workers, but also social environment, which focuses on the relationships around people and what we can do with those. So this is very important because, internationally, social workers have been thinking on, what concept they can use to describe what they do in the protection of the environment. And when it comes to engaging with the environment, what do social workers do exactly? Some people came up with concepts such as green social work, and you might still find the word green social work being used in some textbooks. Other people came up with concepts such as, environmental social work, and many concepts you can find in textbook. But the concept of eco-social work is kind of an internationally accepted one because of it, at least including both aspects of interest to how social workers get to contribute to the environment protection, at the same time contributing also to the social environment, which is a core aspect of social work, actually. Now, why does this approach matters? It's because social workers and human services and even other allied health professionals can advocate for clean resources, as we said, but also healthy living environment. Um, People like yourselves can support disaster affected communities in building or rebuilding their communities. You can work under this framework to help design fair sustainability, which are, again, translated into policies, both in urban and rural areas. But at the same time, this concept really engages and addresses core notions of social justice. So this is a very important consideration because environmental hazards get to affect marginalized groups in a disproportionate way. In the core textbook for this week, you will see Janet arguing how environmental hazard and climate change in particular get to affect specific groups, such as those with low income, groups from indigenous families, other people who are really marginalized in the community are the one at the same time the most affected. And we can reflect on that again as we engage in the tutorial and all the other learning activities in this week. So in a sense, eco-social work offers a holistic approach which ensures inclusive and effective environmental decision making. that we end up making decisions which do not only address the environmental hazards, but also which are informed by the fact that specific groups are being affected in a different way, and marginalized groups in particular are affected in a disproportionate way. And we really, really need to consider that if we need to aim for equity and fairness in responding to environmental hazard, or just taking climate action more broadly. So, eco-social work is also an approach under which we can address climate action and climate hazards in particular. As we said, climate action refers to efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emission and adapt to climate change, and even protect natural environment for current and future generations. Now, eco-social work plays a key role in this activity by empowering communities to respond to climate change with a focus on social equity and environmental sustainability. So this also supports what is now referred to as climate justice, which is just addressing how climate change impacts vulnerable groups and ensuring fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in climate action. So you can see on this picture one of the campaigns, and there are many campaigns now like that in different political parties, actually specifically focusing on climate action. So you might really want to look at the work of these different advocacy groups and political parties and everyone else who might be advocating or engaging in some kind of advocacy, and just see what's ongoing in your own community and where you can start engaging in addressing climate action, whether you are doing social work or not. So this concept of environmental justice is also an important one in the Australian context. It is that, just as I said, the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people in environmental policies. And this again entails how we get to incorporate, equity, development and inclusion into environmental policy, contemporary development policy. There is no way we shall develop environmental policy without thinking of marginalized groups and what equity and inclusion would be meaning in that context. Where do we start? Do we start by, prioritizing their knowledge and their needs? Do we start by working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? Do we also include refugee background people in the environment protection? Do we include children? How do we educate young people, in environmental protection? So all these are key questions really which might need some reflections when it comes to addressing environmental hazard. And the core goal here, or the key principles, are that no group should bear a disproportionate share of environmental harm. And I would even add to that no group should be left behind. But also Indigenous knowledge and rights must be respected and to some extent even prioritized. But also participation and empowerment are central to this activity. And again, as I said, no group should be left behind. Environmental justice also addresses both environmental and social inequalities. And again, all these are core social justice issues. So you might want to look at your communities and see what are happening there. Identify and reflect on an environmental issue which had affected your community quite recently, how you might use eco-social work approaches in addressing this issue, and consider who is the most affected and what a just solution would look like in that context. And again, you'll have the opportunity to share your answer to the Padlet. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope at this point you should now be able to realize how we have achieved our learning objectives for this week. And again, I have to repeat that this has to be complemented by your readings and hard work on the weekly readings, but also the weekly learning activities and workbooks. So to summarize, this environmental policy in Australia seeks to balance people, prosperity, and the planet. And the major challenges include climate change, water scarcity, and biodiversity loss. But also effective response requires strong institutions, adequate funding, and inclusive approaches like eco-social work. And of course, while some political parties, such as the Greens, lead on key environmental issues, actually government and public initiatives have shown broader commitment to some extent, although, of course, as we said, this commitment is questionable in many respects. But we've seen some campaigns such as trees planting at citizenship ceremonies, where people get to be given a tree, and that maybe shows some sort of engagement with the protection of the environment in the government and local government councils. And of course, the general public appears to be quite in alert when it comes to these questions. Now, the final question I had for you is, how can you contribute to environmental justice in your own community? And I think, again, this is a question you can keep reflecting on and drop your answers wherever you find necessary on the Padlet. Thank you so much, and see you in the tutorials.